Good morning to all. In this session, we are going to discuss about our next conic section, ellipse. Listen, suppose we have two fixed points, F1 and F2, and there is a point P1 such that the distance from F1 to the point P1, that is F1 P1, and distance from F2 to the point P1, that is F2 P2, and if their sum is a constant. Okay, so the distances from these two fixed points F1 F2 to the point P1 is a constant. Consider another point P2 and see the distance from the fixed point F1, that is F1 P2, and the distance from the fixed point F2, that is F2 P2, and their sum is a constant. So consider set of all points such that just like P1, P2, P3, P4, P5, etc. such that the distances from these two fixed points and their sum is a constant, then the set of all points makes a conic section or makes a curve known as ellipse. Okay, so ellipse is the set of all points in a plane, the sum of whose distances from two fixed points in the plane is a constant. And listen, these fixed points are called foci. Okay, plural of focus. There are two focuses, that is foci, F1 and F2. Okay, so ellipse is an oval shaped curve. And see, this is x-axis and this is y-axis, x and y. And from these 2 points, listen, suppose consider A and B are 2 points on this ellipse, then the distance AB, okay, then the distance AB is called major axis of the ellipse, major axis. Suppose C and D are 2 points on the ellipse, then the distance CD is called minor axis of the ellipse. So major axis and minor axis. Okay. Major axis is along x-axis. Minor axis is along y-axis. In this orientation, in this form, we can define the standard equation of ellipse as, please note down, x square by a square plus y square by b square is equal to 1. Okay. If major axis is along x-axis and minor axis is along y-axis, then the standard equation of ellipse is x square by y square plus x square by a square plus y square by b square equal to 1. So by heart this formula. And listen, for ellipse there are two foci, F1 and F2. There are two foci, F1 and F2, and this point is called center, and center is always origin. Okay, center is always equal to origin. So listen, AB is the line passing through this midpoint F1 and F2, and see this point is the midpoint of the line segment joining the foci is called center. Now listen, the line segment through foci of the ellipse is called major axis, and the line segment passing through the center and perpendicular to the major axis, that is CD. Okay, this is called minor axis. And the endpoints of, listen, this major axis, endpoints of major axis is A and B. This is called vertices. Please note down vertices. So vertices is the endpoints of the major axis. Then listen, this is center and this is vertex, and also this is focus. We can consider this distance as C. Also from the center to the foci is C. So the distance between foci, distance between F1 and F2 is C plus C, that is 2C. So distance between foci is equal to 2C. Now listen, we can define length of major axis as well as length of minor axis. Okay, length of major axis is 2A and length of minor axis is 2B, because consider this distance from center to this point B as A, and similarly from center to A this length is A. So what is the total length? A plus A is equal to 2A. So total length AB is major axis of the ellipse. Now consider this distance. Center to this point is B. So similarly this distance is equal to B. So what is the total distance? B plus B is equal to 2B. So length of major axis is 2A. Length of minor axis equal to 2B. So you have to by heart standard equation of ellipse, distance between foci, length of major axis, length of minor axis, center is 0, 0, vertices are A and B. A and B are the endpoints of the major axis. Okay, and please note down this standard equation forms when major axis is along x-axis. That's very important. Major axis is along x-axis, because we can define another orientation. That's why I am telling by heart this formula, and keep in mind that this formula only for major axis is along x-axis. So look at the figure. Major axis, this is major axis, AB is major axis and major axis length is 2A. CD is minor axis, it is along y-axis. Minor axis length is 2B, and this point is origin known as center. Center is 0, 0. Then A and B. A and B are called vertices. Okay, A and B are called vertices, and coordinates of vertices are take this distance. What is this distance? Total distance is major axis. So this length is half of major axis known as semi-major axis. Half of major axis. And this part is also semi-major axis. If total length is 2A, then what is length of semi-major axis? It is A. And therefore coordinate of B is A0 and coordinate of A is minus A0. Therefore we can define vertices plus or minus A0. Plus or minus A0 means either A0 or minus A comma 0. Now listen, CD distance. CD distance is minor axis and this distance is half of minor axis. Okay, half of minor axis or semi-minor axis. And length of semi-minor axis is B, because total length is 2B and therefore half of minor axis equal to B. Naturally, we can define these 2 points C and D. This point is 0B and this point is 0 minus B. Okay. So, major axis 2A, length of semi-major axis A, length of minor axis 2B, length of semi-minor axis is B, center 0, 0, vertices A0 and minus A0. Now consider another orientation. Listen, suppose ellipse is in the form just like this. Okay, this is another form of ellipse. Here, this is x-axis and this is y-axis. So, in this case, in this orientation, you can see that this length is greater than this length, isn't it? So, this greater length is called major axis and this distance is minor axis. So in this form or in this orientation, listen, minor axis is along x-axis and major axis is along y-axis. That is the difference from here. Okay, so in this case, we can define standard equation as x square by b square plus y square by a square equal to 1. X square by b square plus y square by a square is equal to 1. Is okay? So this is the main difference from this equation of ellipse. Please note down here minor axis is along x-axis, major axis is along y-axis. Now length of, see in this case, length of major axis is 2a, length of minor axis is 2b. There is no change and therefore these 2 points becomes, listen, 0a and 0 minus a. This is minor axis. Minor axis distance is or length is 2b and therefore these 2 points are b0 and 0b. Okay. So there are two forms of orientation. One is major axis is along x-axis and another orientation is major axis is along y-axis. In this orientation, standard equation is x square by a square plus y square by b square equal to 1. In this type of orientation, standard equation of ellipse is x square by b square plus y square by a square equal to 1. See, in both case, length of major axis and length of minor axis are same. Length of major axis is 2a, length of minor axis is 2b. Okay. Another thing is that in this case, we can define foci as, listen, minus c comma 0. Now listen, in this orientation, we can define foci as 0c and 0 minus c. This is focus. Listen, in this case, foci are c comma 0 and c minus c comma 0. Either we can write plus or minus c0 in this form. In this type of orientation, this becomes 0 comma plus or minus c. This is the difference. Now, in this orientation, vertices we define. Vertices is plus or minus a0. Plus or minus a0 means a0 and minus a0. But in this orientation, vertices becomes, listen, 0 comma plus or minus a. That is 0a and 0 minus a. So this is the difference. And listen, we can define length of latus rectum. Okay, length of latus rectum as 2b square by a. By heart the formula, length of latus rectum is equal to 2b square by a. And finally, listen, the ratio of c and a. Okay, ratio of c and a is known as eccentricity. This is a new term. So eccentricity is the ratio between c and a and it is denoted by e. Okay, so e is equal to eccentricity is equal to c by a. Latus rectum is equal to 2b square by a. So these are the main concepts. So once again I tell you there are two types of orientation. One is type 1. Major axis is along x-axis and major axis is along y-axis. If major axis is along x-axis, then we can define its standard equation as x square by a square plus y square by b square equal to 1. In this case, there are two foci and coordinate of foci are C0 and minus C0, or we can write plus or minus C comma 0. and vertices. Vertices are actually endpoints of this major axis, and this is a comma 0 and minus a comma 0, or plus or minus a comma 0, and center is always origin. And length of major axis is 2a, and length of minor axis is equal to 2b. Now length of ratus rectum is equal to 2b square by a, and eccentricity is equal to c by a. Now listen, in this orientation, standard equation becomes x square by b square plus y square by b a square equal to 1. Now listen here, focus. Foci are, see the difference, 0, comma, plus or minus c. Vertices are 0, comma, plus or minus a. Center is same, center is 0, 0. Length of major axis is 2a. Length of minor axis is 2b. Latus rectum 2b square by a. Eccentricity c by a. All these are same. Only difference is equation, foci and vertices. Okay. So these are the main things about the conic section ellipse. Anyway, you have to go through the YouTube URL. It is compulsory. Through the video, you can easily understand the concept of ellipse. Okay. So in the next class, we will discuss the problems based on these ellipse equations.